So support your local farmers. It's not the plants themselves that are causing any harm. It's more so the way that they are being raised and being harvested. Commercial agriculture has become a fundamental component of our society. Its hyper-focus on efficiency is creating a food supply that feeds an ever-growing global population. Crops like wheat, corn, soybeans, rice, and potatoes are just a few examples of staple crops that are grown for consumption around the world. In spite of its immediate and indirect benefits, the consequences of this kind of farming is detrimental for the soil that farmers rely on. Monocropping, which is essentially growing a single crop in an entire area of fertile soil. Monocropping a few cash crops maximizes profits, but it has also created a culture that is prioritizing money over land stewardship. As a result of this, fertile soils around the world are becoming lifeless. Nutrients are being leached from the soil faster than it can be replenished, directly affecting future crops. Alongside other environmental and human felt consequences, commercial agriculture has reached a point where it is causing more harm than good. First of all, we need to understand what a cash crop is in the first place. As the name implies, a cash crop is a crop that is going to make you that cold, hard, crisp cash that you're looking for after putting so much effort into growing something from a tiny little seed into something harvestable and actually edible and something that people want to enjoy. It's a lot of work. So you definitely want to make sure that whatever effort you're putting in, you're getting, that same kind of output back. The United States is known for growing a variety of cash crops. The three most popular cash crops that are grown in the United States that I am going to be talking about in this presentation are corn, soy, and wheat. There are other plants and other crops that the United States does grow a lot of as well, but they're either not as profitable or they're not as versatile or they don't yield as much. But these cash crops, corn, soy, and wheat, are very popular amongst commercial operations because they know that those crops will make them the most money with the least amount of effort, or at least with less effort in compared to other crops, especially specialty plants and fruits and nuts. Here are some numbers. So, based on USDA data collected in 2024, these plants, corn, soy, and wheat, generated the most in cash receipts. Corn alone earned $63.4 billion in cash receipts. Soy earned $46.8 billion in cash receipts, and wheat alone earned $11.2 billion in cash receipts. In comparison, in 2024, everything that could be categorized as a fruit or nut was combined into one category, and that generated $31.3 billion combined. Anything that was a veggie or a melon also got combined into a category, and together they generated $25.3 billion in cash receipts. Everything else that could not have been categorized was put into the category of all other crops. We can't identify you, so here's your identity is nothing. Those brought in together a total of $51 billion in cash receipts. So a substantial number, $51 billion, but that's for a whole wide range of unknown crops in comparison to corn, making 60 plus billion dollars. Soy, almost $50 billion in 2024. So you can instantly see the value that these cash crops have, especially for a commercial operation which is focusing on profits over health, profits over produce, profits over literally anything else, because it's all about the money, money, money. Cash crops. Yeah. Corn, soy, wheat. Very popular, very profitable, very abundant. They can all be converted into a lot of different things to be used in a lot of different industries. It's very versatile. They're relatively easy to grow in comparison to other specialty crops. And as we mentioned before, profit, profit, profit. They make the most money for the people at the top. These crops wouldn't be able to grow to market and make 50, 60 billion dollars if it weren't for the people growing them. Let's discuss a little bit about the laborers and their labor in a commercial farming culture. And let me tell you, these people have to work hard to make this money. Okay? In a way, they don't have to work nearly as hard now as people had to thousands of years ago just to grow enough food to survive, just to sustain themselves. Subsistence agriculture, that is simply growing enough food for your family or your community to live off for that season, maybe for that year if you're able to store things, prep things, you know. But subsistence agriculture is just about growing enough and maybe a surplus if you have the capability of doing that, if you have the luck, if the rains are in your favor, if the soil is just right. I mean, they didn't have artificial means of improving their soil, of improving harvest, of reducing weeds. They had to use natural materials around them to come up with innovative solutions to improve their agricultural yields, but they didn't have the access to the technology and the just innovations that we've been able to create to maximize and have the harvests that we see in commercial agriculture. Whether they own land and they are farm owners, whether they are farm laborers or farm hands and they just work the land or they just assist in harvesting and the maintenance of these plants, the effects of commercial agriculture are felt by them. So, first of all, let's just understand that even with all the innovations and the modern technology that we have today, farming and agriculture in general is very much hands on work. It's very involved. So, with that reason alone, there are a lot of ways that a laborer can risk injuring themselves out on the field. Additionally, heavy usage of pesticides and chemical fertilizers are known to increase risk of developing certain cancers or other illnesses. And despite any precautions that could be taken, there is still that high exposure risk for those people who are using these chemicals and chemical fertilizers and pesticides and herbicides and pest controls on a daily basis. Alongside these occupational health risks, there is also one of the greatest risks that can affect anybody, regardless of whether or not they own their farmland, regardless of how often they are working the land. A lot of people within the agricultural industry, especially in commercial agriculture, experience stress, specifically economic stress. And this is due to many factors, but some of these factors include immense uncertainty in the market, increasing costs of machinery and supplies, climate change, longer work hours, all of these different factors, and all while carrying this pressure to have to maintain all of that so people can eat every day. It's a lot of stress. And this occupational stress and this exposure to chemicals and these additional hazards and risks of injury, having to work with all these heavy tills and harvesters and tractors and things like that. These are very hazardous conditions for farmers and for laborers that they have to deal with on a daily basis. So, what does all of this have to do with soil? Well, let's consider a couple of things. Let's run it back. What have we talked about so far? We've talked about the monocropping of certain cash crops. In this discussion, we're focusing on corn, soy, and wheat. We're talking about how the repetitive cultivation of certain crops in the same space over and over and over for years and years, along with combined external factors, heavy machinery. I had mentioned pesticides. I had mentioned chemical fertilizers. All of these additional inputs deteriorates the soil over time. You need to understand that the soil, although it isn't a living, breathing organism, it's not like me or you. It's not like any animal or any plant or any fungi. It isn't a living, breathing, eating, sleeping, talking organism. But in a way, the soil has sentience. The soil contains a lot of microorganisms and a lot of nutrients that are beneficial. And this is just one of the many environmental consequences that come from monocropping of a few cash crops. Like I've been saying, just growing corn, soy, and wheat repeatedly, it does deteriorate the soil to the point where it's dry, it's crusty, it can't work anymore. It literally it doesn't know how to grow things because it hasn't been poured into the way that it was pouring into the plants that were being repeatedly cultivated on that land. So the transition from subsistence agriculture to the commercial agriculture that we're seeing today inevitably created some environmental and human felt consequences that we're all still experiencing and will most likely continue to experience if nothing changes. I know it sounds doom and gloom. In a way, it kind of feels like it. It feels like a few corporations are controlling everything. And no matter what changes are made, It feels like we are always going to have to depend on these few mega corporations and on this commercial way of growing food in order to sustain a quote healthy population. But let's consider a couple things. Despite all of the abundance that we're able to create, there is still world hunger and malnutrition around the world, and in the United States especially. There are a lot of malnutrition children here. A lot of seniors are experiencing malnutrition. A lot of people are, because of our ultra processed way of eating food, a lot of people are not getting the nutrients that they need to be healthy. People are getting preventable diseases at a younger age because they are not consuming nutrients that they need to be healthy. And that's partly this is a personal decision, but also a lot of this has to do with the way that food is presented to us. We're not given whole bites of corn, we're giving processed corn syrup and everything from sodas to juices to candies to breads to cereals to anything that comes in a box or a bag. We're Soy is being put in things that you wouldn't even think of soy to be in, and wheat is so refined and bleached and processed to a point where it has none of the nutritional benefit that it would have had the grain been kept whole. These things aren't being grown for our benefit, they're being grown for profit. And if the cost of somebody's profits are everyone's way of life, why should we continue to pay that price? It's not only destroying the soil, but it's destroying our very ways of life and living comfortably, of living well, something that I believe we're all entitled to. So, yeah, a little doom and gloom for sure, especially with this current climate crisis. Shoddy, it's not looking sweet, but there is always hope. And where there is hope, there is change. The present does not have to be the future, and there are plenty of individuals and communities who are creating change in agricultural industries around the world. There is potential for change, and there is possibility that everyone can make that change, and it's already started to begin. There are a lot of places where these changes are being made to improve our food systems and improve the way that we grow and harvest food and the kinds of food that we are growing and harvesting to feed our communities and to feed our livestock, to make the commodities that we rely on a daily basis. So I've been talking trash about commercial agriculture, and despite all of the things and all of the blessings that it has been able to provide for myself and for generations of people, our current systems of agriculture are no longer serving us. A change does need to be made, and the way that the climate and the earth is looking right now, a change should be made much sooner than later. One of the ways that changes can be made is through regenerative agriculture. Regenerative agriculture involves working with the land and its natural patterns to grow a diverse array of crops and edible plants. So there's different kinds of regenerative agriculture. Because I am in the United States, I am focusing more so on agricultural practices that could best be implemented in the very diverse climates and microclimates that exist in this country. With that, I need to acknowledge traditional and ancestral methods. Excuse me. With that being said, it's important to acknowledge the traditional and ancestral methods from American indigenous groups, as they're the most relevant to this region and they're the most necessary to be considered, to be studied, and to be implemented. Indigenous land reclamation and stewardship are among the best ways of ensuring that we're actually taking care of the land the way that it needs to be maintained. And the best part is the information is coming from people who established this knowledge and perfected it thousands of years before colonial settlement and industrial establishment. So indigenous agriculture and focusing on indigenous agricultural practices is one of the best methods of land stewardship. With that being said, we are not prying into closed practices, and we do not need to become the subject leaders in cultures that are not our own. So while we need to make sure that we are paving the way for land reclamation and stewardship for our indigenous communities, we can also take the time to learn about other regenerative practices that maybe reference traditional and ancestral methods of agriculture, but also incorporate modern techniques to create forms and systems that are practical for anybody. Hence, I mention permaculture. And I have a book, Practical Permaculture. I highly recommend this to anybody who is interested in permaculture. There's a lot of really great information in here. I just want to quickly go over permaculture principles and what permaculture focuses on. Permaculture is based in ethics and beliefs that revolve around people and planet, not profits. So it is vastly different from the commercial agricultural norm that we see today. Permaculture is a design based approach to agriculture that mimics nature's patterns to make our lives more sustainable and less reliant on resources that are outside of our control. So essentially, permaculture is seeing what you currently have. How does nature currently work? How can you work with that to create something that you want without waste or with as little waste as possible, with as little harm to the earth and to people as possible, and with as much focus and care for the earth and for regenerating the soil and for providing for local flora and fauna, not just providing for ourselves. Permaculture, it's mindset shift first, and then it's an agricultural practice. Now, this wouldn't be a video where I talk about and share all of these things about agriculture and what needs to change without also giving you ways that you can make change for yourself. Now, there are ideas listed here from small scale, things that you can start at home, to projects that require a lot more collaboration. But we'll get into that. So, here are a few ways that permaculture principles can be implemented into your life, into communities, into industries, and eventually on a global scale. So, let's start small. Change starts at home. So, here are some tips for individuals or families. With or without a green thumb, anyone at home can apply one of these ideas to transform their yard or their outdoor space into a climate resilient and beautiful natural space. So, you could try transforming your plain grass lawn into a climate resilient and colorful landscape. Plant native flowers, grasses, succulents, different kinds of native plants that will attract local flora and fauna like butterflies, bees, beneficial insects, and birds to your garden or to your cultivated space. You can combine this with earth-based materials like clay and metal to design a vibrant space that is far more visually appealing than any old patch of green grass, okay? Plus, it's environmentally friendly, and native gardens tend to use less water than grass lawns, so it's a win 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 for everybody. Next, you could try planting a garden box of veggies or several if you're feeling ambitious. Growing food isn't just for farmers. Try your hand at growing your own herbs or vegetables. You don't need a lot of space to grow one or a couple of plants. If you don't have outdoor space, some plants like herbs and microgreens can grow abundantly indoors with enough light. Feel free to start as small or as large as you'd like. Just make sure it's sustainable for your lifestyle. Finally, if you're already gardening, go ahead and expand. Make that a little food oasis or a food forest, not just for yourself, but also for the local fauna, the birds, the mammals, the insects. Grow a garden that can provide for everyone. Expand your gardening operation. Get some fruit trees. Do a new garden box. Find ways of incorporating more native plants into your current gardening setup. Expand your operations and try to make yourself more self reliant rather than reliant on commercial agriculture. That's the goal of all of these tips. With that being said, as much as some of us dream of doing so, we can't grow all of our own food by ourselves all the time. The beautiful thing is, we shouldn't have to, and we don't need to, because a lot of us are blessed to live in communities that have at least a few people who are really good at gardening and love sharing the abundance. So, our next section, community impact, we'll talk about some local and regional efforts that you can make or maybe form a group to make together. So first things first, support your local farmers, whether that's at markets, whether that's at craft fairs, vendors booths, whatever, wherever your local farmers are, be there and support them. Buy your produce from them, whether that's at a co-op or whether it's at like a community donation event. Find ways to support your local farmers. Some farmers may be opening volunteer opportunities. You could try to volunteer with them if that's an option, but find ways to support your local farms. And if you don't have local farmers near you and there's avid space and an avid safe space to grow veggies, see if you can create a community garden. This may be something that you have to coordinate with your local city or county governments, depending on who owns the land. You may have to get connected with the private landowner. If you're in an apartment and there's like random open space, you may have to get in touch with the property owners to see if you're able to implement a community garden. And then that gives multiple people, residents in your community, the ability to grow their own produce for themselves and share with their community. So, those are a couple of ways that you can make change in the local and regional efforts by either supporting existing farms or creating opportunities for organic gardening within your community, within your county, within your area. You don't have to do this alone. It's much better to build these opportunities with other people, especially people who are more knowledgeable than you. Work as a community to build something beautiful for the community. And finally, large scale innovation. How are we going to make change on the national, international, and industrial levels? How are we going to reconstruct our current systems to create something better for ourselves? And the thing is, there's no single answer. There's no single answer, and I can list off a couple of suggestions, which I will, but we need to understand that no one individual is going to be able to make this change. It does truly take all of us to be able to stand up, to put our dollars where our mouths are, and to make sure that we are only investing in the things that we truly want. So that would be my first statement, is to be knowledgeable about where your food is coming from. And as I mentioned in the previous section, do your best to support local farms, local co-ops, local small scale organic gardeners, or do your best to grow your own produce. Try not to purchase from vendors, from markets, from stores that are getting their produce from these corporations. Put your money where your mouth is, okay? Second of all, we need to start campaigning for change the same way that these mega corporations are able to lobby to get bills passed that benefit them. We can stand up and make our voices heard and put up bills that actually benefit people, that benefit farmers, that benefit the earth in a way that isn't going to harm us. It might hurt the corporation, but so that's another way, is getting involved in government and working to make those changes. And if you can get involved in government, if you can get involved with your community and organize some community initiatives to make sure that everyone in your community, in your town, in your city, in your county can eat and have access to fresh organic produce, and if you can find little ways at home to incorporate these regenerative practices into your daily life and into your routine, and if everybody can work on doing these things at the same time, we can really make a big change. So I hope that this has been informative, and I hope that this gives you some ideas on how possible it really is to transform our current systems of exploitative commercial agriculture into something that is sustainable and fruitful for everybody.